In this Pillars of Eternity 2 build guide, we're going to be taking a look at the second companion you usually acquire, Xoti. I'll be explaining my monk build for both the regular real-time with pause and turn-based modes, so that anyone can use her effectively. If you plan to use Xoti in your party, then watch on for some insight into this pious companion. Note that this build is updated for the 5.0 version of the game. Xoti can be found in Port Mage, which is the first town you will come to on the world map. After the brief dialogue when you get there, head right and you will find her in discussion. Once recruited, you will immediately need to choose between a single-class monk, single-class priest, or a multi-class contemplative, a mix of the two. This can be a tough decision for new players because it's one that is permanent and cannot be reversed later. Xoti's stat spread contains a bit of everything, so she won't be particularly amazing, but she can be decent at either support or striking. When I use Xoti, I usually drop her into the melee striker role rather than the support role, and there are a couple reasons for this. First, the benefit she gains from being a Sister of the Reaping Moon gives her 3 wounds whenever she kills something with a melee attack. This bonus is completely wasted if she's ranged or doesn't deal much damage, which is often the case if you multiclass her with a priest. And second, the unique priest class she gains doesn't really do a whole lot, other than give her a few select spells that are not overly useful. How this build works is by using Dance of Death and Mortification of the Soul to gain wounds, and then by using Torment's Reach and Skyward Kick to attack enemies. This grants you more wounds when you kill one, allowing you to use them over and over. When playing real-time with pause, Xoti will attack rather quickly due to high dexterity and swift strikes. When playing turn-based, she will attack with both fists on regular attacks, helping to boost her damage early on before she gains access to Torment's Reach and Skyward Kick. Her stat spread is better for real-time with pause, but still works okay in turn-based. Xoti comes with the monk subclass Sister of the Reaping Moon. This gives her proficiency with bucklers and +3 wounds when she kills an enemy with a melee attack, but her wound cost is increased by +1 for abilities that use wounds. This subclass is the primary reason I make her a melee-focused character, and it is wasted if she plays a support role or ranged striker. Additionally, wounds are not as useful to ranged characters anyway, so I generally advise not taking the monk class if you plan to play this way. Sister of the Reaping Moon is one of the best subclasses a monk can have for a melee-focused build, so we take full advantage of it. Whenever you are playing a monk build, you always want to consider using fist weapons. This is because you gain damage, accuracy, and penetration with them as you increase in power level, usually outperforming other weapons until late game. However, what weapon is best to outfit Xoti with will be somewhat impacted by which game mode you are playing in and where you are in the game. The only full attack you'll gain early on is at level 5 in the form of Stunning Fists, but this ability is situational and not particularly good at boosting damage, and so will not be used all that often. This means that if you're playing real-time with pause, you will only attack with your main hand if using fists, and you are better off going with a two-handed weapon to make best use of Torment's Reach and Skyward Kick, as these are primary attacks. This will save your mortification to be spent on Swift Strikes and Dance of Death, which will significantly boost your DPS. However, consider swapping back to fists later on in the game when you have access to Flagellant's Path and Whispers of the Wind to make better use of these. If you're playing turn-based, all of your normal attacks will hit with both fists, which gives you flexibility to use them until you gain Torment's Reach at level 5. Once you have this ability, it is advised that you use a two-handed weapon as it's a primary tackle will not allow you to strike with both fists. Much like real-time with pause, consider switching back to fists when you get later in the game and have access to the abilities mentioned before. You really don't need to spend mortification on swift strikes in this game mode until you have lightning strikes, as increasing your action speed is far less useful. In either game mode, it is not a bad idea to keep one weapon set of fists and one with a two-handed weapon, swapping between them as necessary based on enemy armor values. If you're playing a multi-class monk, you'll never gain access to the upgrades to Flagellant's Path or gain the Whispers of the Wind ability, so you'll be much better off staying two-handed than switching back to fists. Note that while Xoti's Lantern is enticing for the resource return it provides, it will significantly reduce your damage, nearly defeating its purpose entirely, so I don't recommend using it with this build. In this section, we're going to cover the must-have monk abilities for this build. These are the ones that really make the build work, and ones that anyone playing this way should take. Since this is a single-class build, let's take a look at the monk skills. Swift Strikes. This buff gives you +5 dexterity and +15% action speed for 10 seconds. This is much more useful in real-time with pause, and you won't use it much in turn-based until you can upgrade it to Lightning Strikes. Mortification of the Soul. This ability gives you wounds and is a great way to gain them if you aren't being hit, which is why we take it. The damage you take is minimal and is worth taking, so don't be afraid to use it often. Dance of Death. This ability is a great way to increase your wound generation and adds accuracy, which you can never have enough of. Try to spend your mortification on this when you are pretty sure you won't be hit. Two-Weapon Style. This passive reduces your recovery time while dual wielding even further, which is great for real-time with pause, but is not needed in turn-based. Blade Turning. This ability is excellent when you're in a tough spot and getting wailed on by one or more enemies. Pop this when you can't kill the enemy you are fighting before it kills you, and watch it kill itself while you take no damage. Torment's Reach. This ability is fantastic and deals increased damage and hits enemies in a cone behind your target, staggering them. This will increase the DPS of your monk, so take it as soon as you hit level 5. Duality of Mortal Presence. This toggle ability allows you to gain Constitution or Intellect for each wound you have, which is fantastic. This will give you an additional plus 10 Intellect if you have 10 wounds, for example. Thunderous Blows. This buff gives you plus 5 Might and plus 2 Penetration for 12 seconds and costs 3 wounds with this build. Pick and choose when to spend wounds on this because the Haymaker ability does not stack with it, and you may be better off saving your wounds for Torment's Reach or Skyward Kick. Enduring Dance. It's very difficult to maintain Dance of Death without this upgrade, so this is well worth the investment. This will save you a lot of mortification, which is great because it's not easy to come by. Rooting Pain. This passive does damage around you that interrupts each time you gain a wound. This is an excellent ability because you gain wounds quite often. Raise Torment. This upgrade to Torment's Reach will allow you to stun enemies you hit instead of stagger, making this a very, very powerful upgrade. Take it as soon as you can. Turning Wheel. This will add plus 2% damage dealt as burn for each wound you have. 10 wounds equals plus 20% burn damage. This makes you an absolute powerhouse and hit like a truck, though you are unlikely to have this many wounds per attack. Flagellant's Path. This gap closer allows you to get to your target instantly, which you will need to be able to do in order to take down casters in the back before they nuke you. Because it's a full attack, you'll strike with both fists, which is another reason to take it. Skyward Kick. This ability is the best way to spend your wounds when you're focusing a single target instead of a group, where you'd be better off using Raised Torment. It increases your damage by 50% and penetration by 3, which is a lot. Shared Pain. This upgrade to Flagellant's Path puts a raw damage bleed on enemies hit by this ability, making it much more effective. The Razor's Edge. This ability increases your accuracy for each wound you possess. This will usually be about 5, so think of this ability as a passive increase to accuracy by 5. Inner Death. This ability does insane damage, particularly if it crits. You can one-shot some of the more difficult enemies in the game with this ability, so use it accordingly. Whispers of the Wind. This full attack will hit up to 6 enemies at once, which is devastating. This will be your go-to when you want to hit many enemies on the screen. Empowered Strikes. This passive grants you 100 penetration and 100 accuracy when empowering an attack, which you can do once a combat. When combined with Inner Death, you can all but guarantee a critical hit, absolutely destroying most anything you hit. Be sure to use this when you absolutely need that crit with your Inner Death. Final tips. When playing with fists, Haymaker does not increase your penetration if you have Thunderous Blows active. For this reason, and because it slows your attack speed, you should not use this ability in real time with pause. However, it does have a place in turn-based where increased initiative is not as much of a penalty. Haymaker does not apply penetration to the AoE of Torment's Reach though, so you need to use Thunderous Blows if you want to boost the penetration of it. Long story short, Haymaker will play a role early on in turn-based, but will be less useful later on in the game. Blade Turning is your go-to oh shit skill for this build, and it can turn really bad situations into ones where you actually come out ahead, especially in turn-based. Pop this when you're surrounded by enemies or one enemy that is hitting Zoti hard to turn the tables. This skill alone allows you to play extremely aggressively because you can always use this when things aren't going your way. Lastly, because Zoti has no real way of gaining health with this build, it's a good idea to spend some points into athletics to give her an emergency heal should she need it. Blade Turning will keep her alive, but Second Wind is a great way to top up when she needs it and is always good on any character. Stay tuned for more Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire guides as we cover all companions in preparation for the console launch.